So picture the scene. It's the middle of the night.
Okay.
And there's this violent, just terrifying storm that suddenly descends on this massive ancient lake. I mean, we were talking about the kind of wind that actually snaps wood. Water is just crashing over the sides of this tiny wooden boat, violently tossing it around.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the thing is, the men on this boat, they aren't novices. Like, these are experienced, hardened fishermen.
Well, right. They spent their entire lives out on that water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But right now, they are just screaming in absolute panic. They're direly convinced they're about to die. And yet, amidst all the howling wind and the freezing waves, Jesus is just fast asleep in the back of the boat.
It's a completely arresting image, really. Just total environmental chaos contrasted with this complete, literal, unconscious peace.
Yeah. And that profound contrast, that's what brings us to the source material for today's deep dive. We're unpacking a really fascinating set of notes from a men's Bible study. It's titled, Be Still and Wait on the Lord, and it was delivered by Josh Sexton back on May 31st, 2026. And these notes basically ask one fundamental question. Like, how do we actually achieve that kind of impossible internal stillness when the world around us is just falling apart?
Well, before we go any further, I think I just want to clearly establish the boundaries of our conversation today.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because this is fundamentally a religious text, right? So our goal for you on this deep dive is not to endorse the theology or ask you to adopt a specific religious viewpoint.
Right. We're not preaching here.
Exactly. Rather, we want to impartially unpack the fascinating psychological and philosophical framework this text presents, because it offers a really compelling look at human nature, specifically regarding how we handle chaos, pressure, and just the absolute necessity of internal stillness.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the crucial insight from this opening storm story, according to the notes, it isn't just about the weather. The storm outside had actually entered the disciples internally. Like, their minds were just as chaotic as the waves. But the storm had not entered Jesus. He possessed peace before the circumstances around him ever even changed.
Yeah, which is incredible.
It really is. And so this sets up the central question of our whole dive today. How do we actually remain still when life just goes completely off the rails?
I mean, it's the ultimate question of resilience, isn't it? And what the speaker does first is he basically dismantles our preconceived notions of what stillness and waiting actually mean.
Because most of us just conflate those words with doing absolutely nothing.
Exactly, like a kind of passive apathy. But the notes argue that waiting and stillness, while they're deeply connected, they are distinct, and neither of them is passive.
Wait, neither of them.
Neither. To illustrate this, the text points to a couple of ancient scriptures. First, they bring up Isaiah chapter 40, which talks about waiting on the Lord. And the notes explicitly define this biblical waiting not as passive inactivity, but as an active state.
An active state.
Yeah, it includes obedience, trust, endurance, worship, and expectation.
So it's a highly engaged posture, not a disengaged one.
Precisely. And then the speaker references Psalm 46, the famous "Be still and know that I am God" verse.
Oh, right, I've heard that one.
Yeah. Well, the clarification here is that stillness is absolutely not laziness. It's an inward surrender. The psychological argument being made is that a restless heart just simply cannot function optimally.
Because there's too much noise.
Exactly. If you are chronically restless, you struggle to hear clearly, you can't trust patiently, you panic easily, and, you basically cannot endure any kind of delay in your plans.
Man, that hits close to home.
Right. The text uses a historical example to prove that stillness does not always mean inactivity. It points to the upper room narrative in the book of Acts.
Okay, remind me, what happened in that narrative?
So Jesus tells his disciples to wait in Jerusalem for power. But look at how they actually waited. They didn't just, go to sleep or stare at the wall for days.
Right.
They gathered together, they prayed daily, they maintained their unity, they stayed expectant. So their waiting was highly physically and spiritually active, but they remained totally inwardly surrendered to a timeline that they couldn't control.
Wow, that distinction actually changes everything. Like, biblical waiting isn't like sitting in a sterile waiting room, flipping through some 3-year-old magazine, totally bored out of your mind.
No, not at all.
It's more like, it's like an athlete holding a plank position.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, because to the outside eye, if you look at someone doing a plank, they're completely still. They aren't moving an inch. But underneath the surface, their core is just burning. Every muscle is actively engaged, and they're expending a tremendous amount of focused energy just to maintain that position.
That is a brilliant biological equivalent to what this text is describing spiritually.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the state being defined here is quiet obedience or even like restrained panic. You're holding the tension. You are actively resisting the urge to break form just because the situation is uncomfortable or frightening.
But, I mean, what happens when we can't hold that tension? Because eventually the muscles start shaking and the form breaks.
Well, the text actually provides a rather intense cautionary tale about exactly that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's practically a textbook study in psychological breakdown under pressure. It looks at the story of King Saul from 1 Samuel.
Okay.
So Saul is waiting for the prophet Samuel to arrive to offer a sacrifice before a major battle. But the pressure is just mounting exponentially. Enemy armies are physically gathering on the horizon.
Right.
His own people are terrified, and they're literally starting to scatter. And to top it all off, Samuel is delayed, the clock is ticking, and the plan is completely falling apart.
I mean, that is the ultimate high-stakes leadership nightmare.
Completely. So Saul snaps. He forces the sacrifice himself, doing something he was explicitly forbidden to do.
No.
And the moment Samuel finally shows up, Saul immediately starts making excuses.
Of course he does.
And the notes highlight this beautifully. They say excuses are often the most glaring signs of inward unrest. The symptoms of a man losing his internal stillness are laid out in these notes like a clinical diagnosis.
What are they?
Panic-driven decisions, impatience, distraction, a compulsive need to control outcomes, irritability, constant mental noise, rushing ahead, followed by just desperately justifying your premature actions.
That is quite the list.
Yeah, Saul's core problem wasn't a lack of strategic information. It was his total inability to remain inwardly still under extreme external pressure.
Okay, wait. I actually have to push back on this a little bit.
Oh, sure.
Just on behalf of anyone listening who works in a really fast-paced environment. Because in today's corporate world, or just in modern hustle culture in general, doing exactly what Saul did is usually praised.
How do you mean?
Well, if the plan falls apart and the team is scattering, the person who steps up breaks the protocol and just takes charge, they're labeled an agile leader. You know, we reward people who bias toward action when the clock is literally ticking. So how does this framework reconcile what we would call like good, decisive leadership with this concept of quiet obedience?
That is a really vital challenge. And the text synthesizes this tension with, honestly, one of its most crucial lines.
What's that?
It states, "Stillness does not remove pressure. It keeps pressure from controlling us."
Oh, that's good.
Right. The text isn't arguing against taking action. It is arguing against taking action that is entirely driven by panic.
Okay. So you're saying the bias toward action isn't the problem itself. It's the internal engine driving the action. Like, an agile leader might make the exact same swift decision as a panicked leader, but the internal mechanism is completely different.
Exactly that. Saul didn't act out of clarity. He acted out of fear because he couldn't handle the internal noise anymore.
His amygdala basically hijacked his rational brain.
Yes. Inward stillness allows a leader, whether that's an ancient king or a modern executive, to evaluate a high-pressure situation objectively. When pressure controls you, you make reactive, impulsive choices that you then immediately have to justify to everyone around you.
Right.
But when you maintain inward stillness, you might still take swift action, but it comes from a place of grounded clarity, not a desperate need to just alleviate your own anxiety.
It's the difference between acting to solve the problem versus acting just to stop feeling nervous.
Perfectly said.
So if Saul shows us the failure of frantic, anxiety-driven action, what does successful pressure handling actually look like then?
Well, the notes offer two deeply counterintuitive military examples. Like, they absolutely defy conventional logic.
I love these.
The first is the Battle of Jericho from the book of Joshua. The strategy given to Israel isn't a siege or a frontal assault. It is literally a silent march around a heavily fortified city.
For days. Like, just imagine the discipline that takes.
Yeah.
You are marching around an enemy stronghold, completely silent. There's zero visible progress.
None.
You don't see the walls cracking on day 2 or day 4. There's no immediate breakthrough.
And yet the text points out that the victory eventually came specifically through that restraint, that obedience, and that total trust in a timing that made absolutely no tactical sense. It's wild. And the second example is even more extreme. King Jehoshaphat in 2 Chronicles, he's facing this massive coalition of armies. He is vastly outnumbered. And the message he receives is, "The battle is not yours, but God's. Stand still and trust."
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because how does Jehoshaphat respond? He doesn't put his most hardened warriors on the front lines to brace for the attack.
No, he doesn't.
He leads his army with singers.
Mm.
Like he sends a choir to the front lines of a brutal ancient war.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
The sheer absurdity of deploying musicians against heavily armed soldiers, it just highlights the radical, almost irrational nature of the surrender this text is advocating.
Right, and it forces us to ask how this works psychologically. Like, how does voluntarily relinquishing control actually help in extreme stress?
Exactly.
And the notes state clearly, sometimes worship is an act of stillness. It is not inactivity. It is certainly not weakness. It is the ultimate, definitive surrender of self-reliance. Sending the singers first was a physical manifestation of an internal reality. It's saying, I am entirely relinquishing my need to control this outcome.
That is so hard to do.
It is. But by giving up the illusion of control, you actually stop the brain's panic cycle from hijacking your nervous system. You access a higher level of clarity because you're no longer operating out of survival mode.
I mean, it's easy to look at an ancient king staring down an army and recognize the need for radical trust, right?
Sure.
But what does that look like when you aren't facing an opposing military coalition, but rather a 3 p.m. deadline, a chaotic kitchen, and just an overflowing inbox?
Well, the notes brilliantly recognize that shift. They move from the macro to the micro, using the story of Mary and Martha from the book of Luke.
Oh, a classic.
Yeah, so Jesus is visiting their home, and Martha is doing all the things that a good host should do. The text specifically calls them needed things.
Which is an important detail.
Very. She's serving, she's preparing, she's working really hard to ensure everything is perfect.
But Jesus points out her internal state. He says she is careful and troubled about many things.
Yes.
Meanwhile, her sister Mary has basically abandoned the kitchen and become still enough to just sit at his feet and listen.
Right.
So what does this all mean for you and me? Because let's be honest, most of us are Marthas.
Oh, absolutely.
The antagonist in this framework isn't some great evil. It's not a moral failing. The antagonist is productivity. It's the totally valid, genuinely needed things that subtly pull us entirely away from inward stillness.
That is such a good point. And the profound principle the text pulls from the story is this. It is entirely possible to be physically near the source of peace, like in their case, literally in the same room as Jesus, while remaining entirely chronically inwardly distracted.
Wow.
Your physical proximity to something good doesn't guarantee your internal absorption of it.
That is fascinating.
And the notes explicitly list the modern enemies of stillness, and they're things we interact with constantly.
Like
Our phones, our jam-packed schedules, endless entertainment, baseline pressure, ambient noise, and just the sheer weight of endless daily responsibilities.
You know, hearing that, it makes me think about how we consume information today. Like, we are constantly surrounded by podcasts, books, and advice about finding peace, but we are more stressed than ever.
Oh, without a doubt.
Is there a way to fix that disconnect between being near something peaceful but remaining totally distracted by our endless responsibilities?
Yes, and the speaker actually uses a fantastic biological metaphor regarding human digestion to explain exactly how to fix this.
Digestion.
Yeah. In the physical body, you can eat constantly. You can chew and swallow food all day long. But if your digestive system is compromised, like if your body doesn't actually absorb the nutrients properly, you're going to continue to grow weak and eventually starve, no matter how much volume you consume.
Right, because it's just passing through.
Exactly. The notes argue that spiritually and psychologically, people do the exact same thing. We constantly consume. We listen to podcasts on our commute. We read articles. We attend teachings. We take in these endless streams of information.
Yeah, constantly.
But if we never slow down, none of it settles. The key quote here is, consumption is not the same as absorption.
Man, that is a remarkably necessary critique of our information age. We fundamentally mistake taking in data for actually undergoing transformation.
Yes.
It's like binge watching an entire dense 8-part historical documentary series on 2x speed while simultaneously scrolling on your phone.
Oh, guilty.
Right. Sure, you technically consumed all the audio and visual information. Your eyes and ears processed the data. But if you didn't pause to actually think about any of it, if you didn't stop to process the implications of what you just watched, you haven't absorbed a single thing. You're just full of empty informational calories.
That is the perfect analogy. And this is exactly why the text introduces the concept of the altar.
The altar.
Yeah, so in a religious context, the altar is a physical place of prayer at the front of a church. But conceptually, what the altar represents here is the intentional creation of psychological space.
Okay, absolutely.
It is a necessary gap built into the routine. space for conviction to actually settle into the mind,
Yeah.
space for reflection, space for surrender, space for internal work to happen before you immediately return to the distractions just waiting for you in your daily life.
So you have to build in the gap.
Yes. The notes assert that the difference between merely hearing a truth and actually being transformed by it is entirely dependent on whether you are willing to linger long enough afterward.
Linger long enough afterward. That is powerful. It's not about the initial impact of the information. It's about the marination.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you don't create the gap, the knowledge just passes straight through you without changing your internal state at all.
Precisely. And the speaker concludes by challenging his audience to adopt a practice based on the book of Hebrews. He calls it a sacrifice of praise.
What does that look like practically?
Functionally, for anyone listening to us right now, it's about the psychological discipline of intentionally carving out this time to deliberately not rush to the next item on the to-do list.
Which is so hard.
It is. And the notes are careful to clarify this isn't because those responsibilities are bad. Martha's responsibilities in the kitchen were real. Your emails are real. Your kids needing dinner is real.
Right.
But you have to carve out this space because some psychological and spiritual realities only deepen in stillness.
The text actually challenges you to use this carved out time, not just for emergencies too.
Yeah.
Like you don't just go to the quiet place when you're desperate and need a favor from the universe or from God.
Exactly.
You go there consistently to practice quiet waiting, gratitude, and surrender.
It brings the entire framework full circle, perfectly aligning with the opening illustration. Yes. We started with Jesus sleeping through a violent storm. The core takeaway, highlighted at the very end of these notes, provides this beautiful symmetry to that image. Jesus could speak peace into the chaos of the storm because peace already lived securely within him.
That's amazing.
The ultimate unshakable lesson of this text is that you can only consistently share what you first possess yourself. If you do not possess internal stillness, you cannot bring calm to an external crisis. You will only add to the panic.
Wow. We've really covered a lot of ground today. We've explored how stillness isn't just lazy inactivity, but a highly active, engaged internal anchor, like holding a mental plank.
Right.
We've looked at the very real danger of Saul's panic-driven excuses, the radical, logic-defying restraint of Jericho and Jehoshaphat, and just the completely everyday trap of Martha's well-meaning productivity.
Yeah, I mean, it is a profound shift from viewing peace as the absence of external trouble to really understanding peace as the presence of internal surrender.
It really is. Well, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Something to chew on as you go about the rest of your day, building on what we've unpacked about modern distraction and this whole idea of absorption.
Let's hear it.
Think about this. What if our modern epidemic of burnout isn't actually caused by doing too much? What if it's caused by our profound inability to absorb the moments when we are doing absolutely nothing?
Oh, wow.
Right? Like if true stillness is a highly active internal state rather than just the absence of motion, perhaps the most exhausted people among us aren't the ones running physical marathons. Perhaps the most exhausted people are the ones trapped in waiting rooms, sitting perfectly physically still, but suffering with incredibly restless, noisy minds.
That is a staggering thought.
It's definitely something to think about the next time you find yourself automatically reaching for your phone the second things get quiet. Well, we want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Take care.